Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Kieran, and I help people using a spiritual perspective. And I also don't give a shit, and that's the whole point of this video, is not giving a shit. In fact, I've never gave a shit, and so when I do give a shit, I think, why do I give a shit so much? Isn't that harming me? It seems to be harming me. So let's take a small example, or a big example. Let's start with either, because again, I don't give a shit. Let's start with suffering, right? This terrible, terrible thing that happens to everybody at some point is we suffer. But suffering is different than a negative event occurring, right? Suffering is determined by how much we give a shit about what is happening to us. And thus, we create that suffering. We're sort of saying to ourselves, well, I care so much about this happening, so that therefore it becomes important that it is happening. Right? We take it upon ourselves unconsciously, not really in a conscious way, because I don't think we would all sort of analyze things like that intellectually, but on a sort of unconscious level, we take on suffering as a personal thing, often because we treat suffering as something that we're doing wrong. So, a negative event happens in your life, which happens all the time. Let's say that you get into a car accident, okay? Now, hopefully nothing too serious, but your car is either total, damaged, okay, it's going to be expensive to repair, right? So a negative thing happens, there's no way around it, it sucks. So then what happens is you start looking at your suffering. You start looking at yourself. You start going, well, I suck, I did that, I co-created it with the universe, right? You get that whole new age idea floating around there that you basically bring in this stuff to your life. So you start thinking about why maybe this happened, something you did. Did you piss off the bus boy at a restaurant you went to? You know, did you not tip enough? Did you spit some gum out a window? Surely it must be your fault that someone rear-ended you. But it isn't. But we take it on ourselves, even without the spiritual idea. A lot of us have a sense of guilt about ourselves. And so we suffer because of that. It's when we start taking the negative event and we turn it inwards upon ourselves. We start associating it with our self-worth, with, how we feel about ourselves. You're an idiot, you suck, you pasty white loser. Maybe that's not applicable to you. But anyway, that's me, right? So we start talking shit to ourselves. We start creating this this idea about what we're going through, right? So suffering is the story that we're creating about ourselves, right? Negative events that are happening or positive events that happen, they're just events. They're things that happen, right? And we can react to them accordingly. But suffering is like this, thoughts shaping how we basically interpret things, how we feel about what's happening, right? The story that's going on. So suffering becomes this great burden that everybody goes through. And it's like the Buddha said, presumably he said this, I wasn't actually there, but he said that all suffering is necessary until it isn't, right? So he didn't actually say until twice. That was just me repeating the same word. But he did say that suffering is necessary until it isn't, right? So that means, basically what I'm trying to say here is that we suffer until we realize we don't have to. So we don't have to be a part of it. And you can't realize that you do not have to do something until you stop giving a shit. Now that seems like maybe contradictory advice, but it's actually a beautiful paradox, as all truth truly is. It's beautiful because not giving a shit frees you up. It's freedom. So let's focus in on that for just a little bit right here. Freedom is not saying I'm going to do whatever I want because I can. I don't want to be chained down. I'm sorry, I can't commit to you, Jennifer. I would like to fuck all these other girls. Sorry, can't do it. That's not freedom, right? Settling down, sticking with this job, staying in one place. This is not taking away your freedom. That's not what that is, right? People mistake freedom for variety, but that's different video, different topic, different idea. Right now, we're just talking about freedom and how it relates to us spiritually. So freedom is essentially the ability to say yes or no to something. And suffering happens when we feel like we haven't chosen, the thing that we're experiencing, somebody's telling you to do something, or somebody, perceiving to take away your freedom, so you begin to suffer, forcing people to get vaccines to work at a place, okay, so suffering ensues because somebody's telling you to do something. same wearing masks, right? So somebody told you to wear a mask, so you start to suffer because you didn't choose to make that choice, right? You didn't choose that consciously there. So if you don't feel like you're in control of the choices that you're making, it feels like you're suffering. So this is what happens. A negative event occurs, and suddenly we take it upon ourselves and we begin suffering through different occurrences, right? So suffering is just us reacting to ourselves. And the more you give a shit, the more that suffering happens, the more that these things start to come into your life. So when it comes to freedom in particular here, it's the ability to say yes or no to something. So if you can say yes, it doesn't mean you're going to, it just means you have the freedom to. And that's why ultimatums often don't work in relationships, because if you say to somebody, well, you give up this or I'm not dating you anymore, well then more often than not, the person's either going to pretend to give it up and lie, I've been there, or they break up because they're not going to let somebody take away the option to do something, right? It's not about quitting something. It's about making a choice to do something on your own for your own benefit, right? You can't expect other people to change you, right? And so you shouldn't expect that for your own self as well. So suffering happens when we feel like our freedom is being attacked, but we already don't understand what it means. And so every time things happen to us, we forget how much we give a shit about the fact that it's happening in the first place, right? And so giving a shit, it's like our mind thinks that we have to give a shit in order for things to work out. If we don't give a shit, they won't work out, right? There's this mental process that we go through. It's like a dolphin trying to jump through hoops, it's I don't even know what the hell the point is, but we're doing it anyway. And we're trying to force ourselves to give a shit more, right? It could be any example. I mean, just take something like money or finding a job, right? Maybe something a little bit more applicable to the people that I'm talking to right now. Finding a spiritual job, finding a spiritual path, something that you like doing, earns you money. Maybe you can help others, bring some joy into the world. Okay, if you can do those things, that's great. And I think a part of you probably believes that it's possible because other people are doing it. But you don't know how, and you give a shit so much about it, and you just care so much, and yet no matter what you do, nothing seems to be working. Nothing seems to be happening. Nothing seems to be going the way you want it to. But why shouldn't it? You're caring about it so much. You're doing all this stuff. You're attempting to talk to people. You're trying to do this and, trying to do that. And you're trying to get yourself into a position where this could work. So you're giving a shit so intensely about it. And yet it seems to not be there. It doesn't seem to show up for you. Right? This happens in relationships a lot. We care so much about somebody texting us back or messaging us or coming back into our life that we're not really paying attention to what the feeling is being created to our own experience. We don't realize that we're actually suffering, right? But yet we think that giving a shit is a good thing because, of course, it's good to have empathy, to care about causes important to you, but we forget that there's a million things going on in life, and we take on even a small percentage of that, and that's even too much. That's even too much for us. And sometimes you can handle more and sometimes you can't, but there's only so much you can take on. There's only so much you can do, right? So it's not to shut off your ability to care, right? So for example, I would hope you're aware of this if you pay attention to the news at all, but the other day there was a mass shooting, again, in the United States. It seems to be one of our things that we're good at, mass shootings, barbecue, prostitution, okay? All great things, legalizing drugs. We're really good at lots of stuff that might not be good for others, but mass shootings, okay, we're really great at that. I think like 30 people in like less than a month died in mass shootings, one in Buffalo, one in Texas, right? So horrible thing that happened. Kids died, okay, not great. I wouldn't kill kids, I'd like to think. So terrible tragedy that occurred in Texas. And I'm not going to get into whole gun crap and stuff like that. That's not the point of this video. Got to stop myself before I get into it. But this is a terrible event. I think most people can agree. And if you care about it, you'll probably feel something, a sense of sympathy, empathy, right, compassion. But what happens then is the tragedy then starts to form. You automatically care about it, but now it becomes drama. Now it becomes something you can invest into. And now your day's affected. Now your whole day is sad and you feel depressed and the next day. and so on and so on. And suddenly all the things in the world that are negative and horrible and tragic that happen on a daily basis start to take an effect on your life. They become part of your life because you give a shit so much. You care so much about it, right? Same thing with trying to figure out solutions. We care so much about the solution we are trying to figure out. The mind loves little puzzles, right? That's why it's there, okay? It's there for human evolution, right? It's a good thing, of course. It's not bad. It's a great thing that the mind tries to figure out solutions. It's good. But, you know, it's even part of a healthy ego, right? But caring so much about things causes this effect where it's the opposite of what we want, right? And you can go into about energy, about how you're repelling the thing that you want. Okay, I don't even really want to focus in on that. That is all well and good, but focusing more on the feeling, that's how you know. Really, that's how you can tell. I mean, the energy thing is anybody's guess, okay? There's not like scientific proof that says when you give a shit about something, you're repelling it energetically. Okay? There's no scientific proof that says that. That's more like pseudo-spiritualism, wisdom sort of thing. And I'm all for that. That's good, okay? But focusing on the emotions, if you care about something so much, you create your own suffering. So that's a better indicator to me that what you're going through is like, of course you're not going to get the thing that you want. You feel shitty about it because you care so much, right? So again, going back to a relationship, you meet somebody, you like them. Okay, this happens all the time. Boy meets girl. Maybe these days it's boy meets boy, girl meets girl, boy meets girl that isn't girl, and girl meets boy that isn't boy, right? The world is evolving. But keeping it simple, boy meets girl. You like the person, maybe they like you, there's some flirting exchanges, okay, you got some numbers going on, but you're starting to get into it, you're starting to get a little bit, you know, I don't know, maybe you're getting ahead of yourself, expectations, etc. Little things that people do and forget about, which I think are pretty normal given circumstances in life, but we start to give a shit more. We slowly but surely, we start to give a shit more. And when you expect a text message and things like this happening, and they don't, so now you're like, well, are they going to text me? What's going on, right? Is this, that, you know, they say this, they say that. You have all these mixed signals, different things are occurring, right? So obviously it doesn't happen all the time, but it's a pretty fair example. You know, feelings not being reciprocated properly. And yet, you know, you're wondering, well, there's an attraction, so what's going on? Why is this not happening? So you start to give a shit more naturally, and you don't really stop yourself, and it keeps going and it keeps going. And you keep caring and it's not happening. They're not texting you. They're not doing anything. So how come is it when you didn't give a shit, everything was going fine, but as soon as you started to care, things didn't work out? They started to get more distant, push away from you. And why is that? Well, you started to create your own suffering. Because the suffering is coming from you now. It's saying, this isn't working. This expectation isn't being met. Things aren't happening. This should be like this. You have an expectation of the way things should go and should be, and that's not necessarily wrong either. You should expect a healthy partner, someone to treat you with respect. The problem happens is when that doesn't occur, and now we're crossing over that line into suffering. Because otherwise it would have just been a sad event. I liked somebody and they didn't like me back. That's just sad. That's objectively like, you know, that sucks, man. Sorry to hear it. That's like, I can empathize, right? And then what happens though is like, we suffer about it. We then go, well, this isn't happening because it should be like this, this, and this, and now it's happening to me, right? So now the suffering begins. And so, yeah, of course you're not getting what you want, the thing that you're trying to get, because you care so much about it. If you're trying to gain clarity in your life, it's another great example. I'm going to take a water break. This is my fancy new water bottle. It's called Proud Source. Do you give a shit? I don't. But on the bright side, it tastes like metal, so it's good stuff. So, so you know your water's really good. It's when it starts tasting like metal. Lots of minerals. So anyway, so you take clarity, for example. You're really trying to figure out what your next step is. You know, well, pretty important thing. I think we all have these crossroads-like moments, right? But you give a shit so much that you seem to not be able to get this solution, this clarity, right? I understand this all too well. And this lack of getting the separation that's immediately happening upon this sort of suffering of not getting what it is that you're trying to get, even with all your manifestation skills and all your spiritualism and all of your wisdom. Sorry, a little bit of metal in my throat, apparently. What happens is you fall short of that goal, right? And so you take that upon yourself, you start to suffer, and it makes sense because the clarity that you're looking for can't come in because you're suffering about not having it. You feel shitty about the fact that you don't have it. So if you feel shitty about not having something, trying to continue to get it, trying to care more about it, isn't going to bring it in. The opposite will. You don't give a shit anymore. I don't give a shit anymore. I mean, it's like it's like even with animals, you know, like so many times you try to make like an animal come to you. Oh, come on, I got food for you. Like the animal doesn't know what your intentions are, but you do, and you're like, I'm not going to hurt this animal. You know, stray cat, this and that, and you know, and it doesn't, and they don't give a shit. They don't want to come, right? And it's only when you stop caring about them ever coming that they actually do. Right? It's the same kind of thing. It's just because of your feelings, really. The energy and stuff, again, sure, great. But the feelings are like this really great way to just determine whether or not what you're trying to get is even available to come in. Because shitty feelings, negativity about it, feeling bad about, you know, not getting it, intellectually beating yourself up, that you're not smart enough or powerful enough or not as good a manifester as you can be to bring in something like clarity or whatever. You know, it doesn't work. Like there's this cat, this stray cat. I swear to you, it's been coming here like 3 years. It disappeared for a while. I don't know where it went. Vacation, maybe it took some time off. I don't know. COVID must have hurt it a little bit. But anyway, it disappeared and it came back. But the whole time I've known it, I've called it Scaredy Cat. It's a stray cat with beautiful fur. And I like cats. You know, I really like them, I guess. Not sexually, just normally. A normal level of liking for cats. And I want to like pet it, you know, I want to pet the cat. It's just this nice looking cat. It's got testicles that are huge, by the way, just for your information. Huge. I mean, like zebra level testicles, bigger than mine. They're huge. It's like abnormal. When I first thought it, I thought it was a mountain lion, but it's just this big ass cat. But he, you know, beautiful cat. I always give it food. It's hungry as shit, like all the time. Like it'll eat like 3 cans of food. Like it's a hungry guy. But no matter what I do, even though it's used to me, it will absolutely not come up to get pet. Like if I go out to feed it, put it in a bowl outside, it takes like 5 feet steps back, you know, and it doesn't go anywhere near me. It's only when like I start walking away that it comes. So there's basically like the closest it will ever get is, you know, 5 feet away, really. Maybe less, sometimes 3 or 4, but it's never getting close, and it's never let me pet it once, not one time. Other cats, sure, they'll let me pet it, but this cat, and I get mad sometimes. I'm like, you know, come on, man. Like, you know, let me pet you. And then I start to feel shitty. Like, it's just a negative thing. It's just one, and it's a very small example. But because it's a small example, you can see how these situations stack up. And then really horrible things happen, and of course, that's going to be even worse. Because if you give a shit about a cat not letting you pet it, then you're going to give a shit a lot about somebody breaking up with you or something happening, losing a job. Okay, it's like giving a shit is great. It's good to have empathy and to care about what happens to you, but obviously what I'm talking about is the exact same as letting go, right? It doesn't matter if the cat lets me pet it or not. I'm still going to like the cat and I'm still going to feed it. So with that acceptance, I don't have to give a shit. So like sometimes I have to catch myself, right? And I have to, because it's a little thing, so I don't pay attention. But the little things build up to the big ones. The big ones, you know, I can be really good at not giving a shit. But the little things I start to pay attention to recently, like, oh, this is building up. Like there's tons of these little examples where I find myself caring way too much. And that's not who I am. You know, it's just not what has worked for me to bring things into my life, to get what I want, to feel better, right? So the whole point is like not giving a shit makes me feel better. So I can get more things into my life because I feel good about it, because I feel good about what I am. Content maybe, right? But the idea that the more you care about something, that, you know, the more it will bring into you is false. It never works. It creates stress and pain and suffering, and it's all just us reacting to our own emotions and thoughts and all this crap. And it's like, no, don't give a shit. It's so liberating. It's so free to just not care anymore. It's like beautiful experience to not care. It's a wonderful, wonderful experience. And it happens profoundly. There's an author I read. I don't know if I have his name off the top of my head. I guess I don't. But I think the book he has is called like No Fucks Given or something like that. What is it? It's something like that. Okay, it's basically the idea I'm talking about here. I think his name is John Parkins. I don't know what the fuck his name is. It's something like that, okay? Who cares? Nobody cares, right? But the idea is if you can find him, he's a good author. It's something like that. He's an English author. And he was talking about one time that that basically like he lost his job and this dream job and all this stuff, and he broke down on like the streets of London and cried, like his eyes out, just, complete babbling his eyes, crying uncontrollably in the streets of London, people looking at him, okay? That's how you know you don't give a shit, is when you can cry in public. You don't care at all. And he said that was probably like the best moment of his life in retrospect, because that was the moment he stopped caring. Didn't mean that he doesn't give a shit about the things that are important to him, because those things are still going to be there. But when you don't give a shit, you're allowing everything that doesn't work to burn, and what is still going to be there is still going to be there untouched, right? Because those are the things you naturally care about. But arguably, you could probably stop giving a shit about 60% of the stuff that happens to you, and you would still be, and you'd be just much better off, right? And it's the same thing when I think about in my life, times where I just stopped giving a shit, vulnerability. It helped me get over like huge bouts of depression, hard drugs, stuff like that. So just stopped giving a shit. Like you give a shit so much about what's happening to you, about what might happen, what might not happen, that with the freedom that comes along with the unknown, which is a different video I'd like to do in the future, there is this expanse. And in that expanse, you can finally swim. It's like giving a shit in the sense that I'm talking about is like swimming in a crowded pool that's only 4 feet deep and 10 feet long. It's in like 5 feet across. There's no room. There's nothing to do. But if you don't give a shit, it's like what you're suffering. It's like, oh man, like I have to be in this pool and this is the only. No, screw that. Go to a different pool, right? It's the idea. Go to somewhere bigger. Go to the ocean. Perspective is everything, right? But giving a shit, the more that you care, is not going to help you. I don't think, right? It hasn't been my experience. And every philosophy, throughout human history, like they're all talking about that. All these spiritual teachers, they don't say, don't give a fuck, don't give a shit. I say it because it's more applicable to the human, to the regular person, to me and you. It's more applicable because it's the same thing, but it's all about letting go. And letting go has always been the key. Manifestation, what about manifestation works exactly? All the steps? No. You're paying for the steps. The steps are nonsense. You're paying for them. People are charging you for the steps. Because if all they said to you was let go, you wouldn't need to pay money, because everybody already knows how to do that. So anyway, that's a different topic as well. So try not to give a shit. Take a break. Take a day off. What would happen if you just fucking existed? Just allow yourself to be. Sure, you got things to do. Do those things. Do them when you have to do them. You got an appointment. You got a date. Sure, you got to do some taxes, whatever. But I mean, you don't have to justify your existence to anyone. So you don't have to care so much, because there's nothing to prove. You're okay. Anyway, I hope this video was helpful. If it wasn't, please let me know in the comments and I'll do absolutely nothing about it. Okay guys, talk soon.